Hello, happy Sunday.
Happy Sunday.
Welcome to the Two Mats Q&A, brought to you by the subscribers of the New European.
A fantastic group of people.
We're going to do this in two halves as usual, but the first half we're going to concentrate on the amazing reaction we had to our
Yes, thank you very much.
assisted dying
It was a really
episode.
moving and very enlightening.
Yeah, literally scores of people writing in with comments and loads of personal stories as well, which we're going to reflect on and talk about in the first half. So let's kick off with generic person 8295. I'm not sure that's your real name, is it? Generic person.
It's a funny first name, but you never know these days.
I'm a medical student and cancer survivor in Canada. Watching patients wither and die of cancer is very difficult for me to see. But seeing MAID patients, these are the patients who MAID is the policy whereby people are allowed to have assisted dying in certain cases in Canada. Watching MAID patients at home, surrounded by their family, dressed in their favourite clothes, listening to their favourite music, saying their final words and passing away peacefully in their beds is really a beautiful thing. Finally, patients have a dignified way to end their life instead of entering an opioid-induced coma, waiting for cancer to kill them. I'm essentially guaranteed to have cancer again, and I will choose MAID when the time comes. Matt, how does that... Because you were... I think it's fair to say you ended the debate pretty much against this, right?
Against it at the moment. I mean, my principal problem was that I think that, and Wes Streeting, the Health and Social Care Secretary, has said he'll vote against the Kim Ledbetter bill on similar grounds, which is simply that our social care stroke hospice system stroke palliative care system is simply not good enough for this to be a genuinely free choice.
Yeah.
But of course, look, I mean, anyone reading that email, how could one not be moved by it? I totally understand and respect the views people have about wanting that autonomy. It is a very complicated and nuanced moral argument. And it's interesting because it's coming to a head. Not only is this bill going to go through Parliament, private members bill, but I didn't know this was coming, but the Welsh Senate, the Welsh Assembly, this week voted against it.
Against it, yeah.
So it's obviously going to be quite an argument.
Yeah. Robert wrote in saying that in your debate you lamented the increase in Canada. Canada did loom large, didn't it?
Did.
As an example of how this has played out. You lamented the increase in Canada of people wishing to use the assisted dying services instead of assuming that these people have been manipulated or coerced into it. I don't think we.
No, I didn't. No. My beef with the Canadian system was that there had undoubtedly been an expansion from the. I mean, it is undoubtedly an example of the slippery slope. In 2021, the definition of what can count for MAID was extended quite significantly. Yeah.
Robert goes on to say, look, you might find it abhorrent, but why do you decide that people shouldn't be given the right to make the choice? Why should people wait for some mythical gold standard in palliative care to be reached before they're judged capable of deciding they don't want to continue living?
Well, because I suppose, and I don't always want to be in the position, I suppose, of arguing against, because I do see the other side, but, just for the sake of argument, I think that this boils down to what is autonomy.
Yeah.
And I suppose my worry is that until there is a genuine choice, it isn't autonomy actually.
Yeah.
And that I do worry about the lack of palliative care. I don't, and particularly in a context now where these care systems are not really likely to get much better in the immediate future.
Yeah.
And I do worry about slippage. It's interesting because everyone quotes Oregon as the place where there's been no slippage. So I went and did a bit of digging. And lo and behold, there has.
Yeah, really?
Yes, there was a significant expansion in what counts as a potentially terminal disease recently to include, and this made me think even more, diabetes, anorexia, arthritis, and complications from a fall.
Gosh.
Now that's from a paper in the new called the new bioethics journal in April, if anyone's interested in chasing it. But there has been an expansion there.
Yeah.
So it is not actually the case that Oregon is a place where there's no expansion.
That's
so that's my kind of worry.
I did also reflect, because I was very clearly, I think, on the side of saying people should choose. But I did reflect on what you'd said about the palliative care, and this is Wes Streeting's point, isn't it? That
yes.
Is it a genuine choice if the other option being to carry on living, is actually unnecessarily painful and agonising because the palliative care is so shit in this country?
Yes.
And respect to people who are engaged in palliative care. I'm sure everybody's doing
they're
their
up
best.
against their...
Of course they are. But if it could be improved, and the residual days you have as someone with a terminal illness could be more tolerable, then that's a more genuine choice, isn't it?
It's also the case that, fantastic that we have socialised free at point of use medicine, but it does mean that medicines are rationed.
Yeah.
So, for example, there's a new medicine. This was this week. It's called Donanemab,
right?
And it has been hailed as a potential breakthrough in Alzheimer's.
Yeah.
But NICE, the committee that authorises medications on the NHS, has turned it down because it's too expensive.
Too expensive, yeah.
So what I worry about is that in a socialised healthcare system, which, great by the way, which is underfunded, hospice care is terrible. I mean, not terrible in terms of the care work, but underfunded again, under-resourced. Palliative care, not good by international standards. If we airlift this option in, we're doing so in a battlefield, really. That's my concern. Much more than, I don't want anyone to, the last thing I want is for people to suffer. But as I said last week, I do think that this is a big, this really is a moral Rubicon.
Yeah. I mean, Marion wrote into that point saying, if I was diagnosed with a terminal illness, I would definitely want to be in control of the end of my life. No matter how good palliative care is, towards the end, it would become less dignified and distressing. However, I suffer from acute FOMO, fear of missing out. So I would wait until the hope of improvement is completely gone, at which time it would probably be too late for me to be able to end my own life. This isn't uncommon. So an assisted suicide becomes necessary. That I can see myself in that position.
Yes.
And this is what strikes me as absolutely tragic about the choice people have got to make right now, which suggests to me that the status quo isn't right, which is that people have to sort of book ahead, and make plans. And that great Andrew O'Hagan Mayflies.
Yes.
Where it ends, and sorry for the spoiler alert, but it ends with the guy at Dignitas, and he's playing football in the garden of the Swiss death clinic, about to go and end his life, because he knows that within a few months it's going to be intolerable, but right now is the only time he can do it.
Yes.
That seems wrong to me.
Agreed. But the problem, and Marion actually inadvertently raises it, which is the bill, as again, the Kim Ledbetter bill hasn't been published yet, so we're going on the Lord Falconer bill, which is understood to be almost identical, is that you have to sort of intercept at a certain point, right? So the flexibility that Marion is asking for may not be available under the right. So it says 6 months. You're dying within 6 months. Well, what will happen then?
Yeah.
When other people say, well, hang on, what about me? I might die in the next 12 months, but I want my chitty to say, I can have this. This is one of the, and this has happened in other jurisdictions, is that what happens is that the law is tested by judicial review. Other categories of people say, well, why can't we have these rights?
Yeah.
So it's never the end of the story.
Got
now,
you.
I think when you said something really spot on this then, which is the status quo is not acceptable. I think you're right. And I think if you look at the polls, what's very interesting is that across every demographic, like age demographic, people are overwhelmingly in favour of this. I think it is going to happen. Right. So everything I'm saying, I believe, but I actually think pragmatically that we are in the near future.
Right.
Maybe not this time, but at some point quite soon.
Interesting.
This is going to happen.
And lastly, Vera wrote in about, and I didn't know it had a name, this, because I
didn't either, no.
mentioned, and it's fascinating. I mentioned having seen somebody die peacefully, having been told by a nurse that if you gave several presses of the morphine button, they would slip away, and I didn't know, but it's called the principle of double effect.
Yes.
And what it means is, and this is where the grey areas get even greyer, which is that giving a medicine can have two effects.
Of course.
One is it can alleviate your pain, but the other effect is it will kill you. And this is where, at that very sharp edge of people slipping away, then the actual medicine that alleviates the pain is also going to kill them.
So what I do know to be the case is that within the current law, doctors are able to administer palliative care even if they know that it will shorten life.
Yeah, right.
So whether that particular sort of what you described as a specific dosage, whether that's not possible, I don't know. But it is certainly the case still that a doctor, can administer morphine to kill pain in the knowledge that it will shorten life.
Well, very interestingly, Vera says, I volunteer on the ward of my local hospice. She says, I have a suspicion that since Harold Shipman, this remedy for extreme pain may have fallen out of favour.
Yeah, I bet.
Last week I attended a Zoom with them on palliative care and I asked about double effect and the host was evasive. I got the impression that they do everything possible to keep the patient comfortable so long as it doesn't shorten their life. But I may have got that wrong, she says, especially as patients are allowed alcohol. Well, that's always good to know. Worth checking out. So if anybody does actually know, if anyone, a Macmillan nurse or a nurse engaged in palliative care,
even if anonymously, by the way,
please tell us what actually happens.
Because we're really, I think that I think it is going to happen in the near future, or medium to near future. And it'd be really good to know now that we've sort of discussed the big moral framework, it would be really good to get into some of the detail about this, because I suspect it's going to become a huge debate of our time, and it would be great, would it not, if we can avoid, I don't mean us, but as a society, the sort of Brexity polarisation on it, because I can feel that coming down the track. There's already camps forming and demos, and I understand why. But actually, what really matters here is the well-being of people and doing the right thing, but with due diligence, I suppose, is what that's my concern.
And just to end this section before we move on to other lighter questions in the second half, I know we have both got absolute respect for people working in palliative care, doing enormous difficult jobs.
And by the way, I have huge respect for people who hold a different view to me on this. I mean, I'm not sure I do hold a sort of set view on it. It troubles me. I think it's right. It's good to be troubled by moral dilemmas. I think there's too much. There's too much certainty about in the world at the moment. A bit of doubt and a bit of reflection. A
bit of Michael Burke's moral maze. Never goes amiss.
It never goes amiss. But also, it's like one of the reasons I found that such a stimulating conversation when we had our first chat about it was I went to it and thought, and these responses from our listeners, fantastic.
Yes. Thank you so much for all of them. We really do appreciate. We'll see you in a couple of minutes. Welcome back, folks. Simon in Chelsea writes in,
is Kamala Harris right to compare Donald Trump to Hitler? Well,
Hitler keeps coming up when in the context of Donald Trump. I mean, not only do others compare Donald Trump to Hitler, Donald Trump compares Donald Trump to Hitler.
This is the problem. I mean,
he said it's reported, I should say.
John Kelly, his former...
It's been confirmed by John Kelly.
On the record, on audio, crucially.
That Donald Trump said, I want generals like Hitler's generals.
And then did the Hitler wasn't all bad
I thought, which generals, though? The ones that tried to blow Hitler up?
Presumably not.
Or the ones that led to the fall of Berlin? Which ones do you want?
We should say that John Kelly is not a a raving radical left communist.
No.
He is very, very conservative.
Yeah.
But his response to Trump, he said, was to say first, you should never say that in public, Mr. President.
Incredible.
And then to try and enlighten him to the fact that, there really was no kind of for and against with Hitler, right? It's just, that's a straight no, right? That's a straight 9.
Yeah.
So, but I actually think there's a great, it's called Godwin's law for some reason. I think because a philosopher coined it first, but you should avoid the weight of which is you should avoid comparing people to Hitler. Literally Hitler. Everything is literally Hitler, and it is overused. But actually, I thought Harris was richly entitled to do so, because if Trump's former chief of staff says it, then you, Trump's opponent, are quite entitled to go out and say, look, I know that we're not meant to say literally Hitler, but actually literally Hitler.
I mean, we've done it a couple of times on the New European. We once put the barcode on his upper lip, which looked like a little Hitler moustache, and we put the words "not again" on his upper lip once again, and it was and of course people do like it, and it does make a point. But there's 5% of me thinks it's broadly unhelpful, because it gives the opposition such an easy out. Oh, you're being ridiculous. This is typical left-wing hyperbole. Of course he's not like, he hasn't killed 6 million people, you idiots. It gives them that.
Yes.
Which seems like,
but
you
he is
are
planning
giving them
on deporting 11 million people, against their will. And I think that there comes a point where, if it looks like Hitler and it talks like Hitler, it's a Hitler.
Yeah.
And I'm not sure that, you're right, it should be used sparingly, okay? But also, we shouldn't just pretend that he's a mad old man with silly hair who makes jokes about sharks and electricity, because although he is all that, don't forget, fascism has a rich history and association with buffoonery.
Yeah.
They've often gone together. Yeah. And show business and all the rest of it. And the thing that often goes in this context is people talk about Trump derangement syndrome. People like us are, Trump drives us mad because, we can't cope with him. Well, actually, I think having Trump derangement syndrome is a pretty
good idea.
Rational response.
I mean, would people accuse people of having Hitler derangement syndrome in 1938?
Yeah, if you're not deranged by Trump, what would it take to derange you?
Very good. Also, by the way, I do think it is probably more useful calling him a fascist than a Nazi or Hitler, because Umberto Eco did a great...
You went through the list.
A great list. I think it's 13 or 14 points of what is a fascist.
Every tick.
And it's tick, 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 tick. He is a fascist.
No, I think that's a very good point. Fascist rather than Hitler. But, she wasn't ultra vires.
Simon, thanks for your question. Next question, please.
Is there an alternative to X you could recommend? I'm a 68-year-old grandmother with left of centre and pro-European political views, but try hard to listen to all opinions. It's so depressing to hear all the absolute garbage on Elon Musk's platform in recent weeks. Could you please advise an OAP who's trying to keep up with 24/24 tech? Sarah Cheel in the New Forest.
God, it's such a difficult one, this.
And you hear it a lot. I mean, it's a question lots of people ask.
I mean, our political editor, James Ball, reckons that there is a sort of mass evacuation of Twitter.
Blue Sky, I think, is the one.
Blue Sky is the one. But I mean, and I have thought, because it is a cesspit, and I think, you've only got to look at the people who do really well on Twitter.
Yes.
With some exceptions. But it tends to be the people who are using it in a sort of far end spectrum, malicious way.
Well, the algorithm undoubtedly favours the shrill and the extreme and the polarising. So I'm still on it because I do find it useful for research purposes, but it doesn't function as a social network.
Journalists love it because journalists are all ego lunatics, and also it's the one platform where you get that instant dopamine rush of reaction.
I mean, it is unfortunately still a useful kind of, if unreliable, newswire. Things break very quickly on Twitter.
That's true.
You have to exercise extreme care and caution. But But I don't think that's what Sarah's asking. I mean, Sarah's asking, I can't, and I totally understand this, I can't put up with this kind of cesspit anymore.
Yeah.
And so I think that the two options people talk about in that sort of vein are Threads, which apparently is quite civilized.
Yep.
And as you mentioned, James talks warmly about Blue Sky. So that's the best we got, I think.
Yeah, thank you, Sarah. Sorry we can't do any better.
Totally
than
understand,
that,
though.
Yeah, do sympathise.
Good luck with it.
Yeah. Marek Wesolowski. Wes Streeting has announced a 10-year plan for the NHS. Is it my imagination, or did not Labour criticise the plan drawn up by Andrew Lansley many years back? One of the main reasons for the plan seems to be many services put out into the community. Would this not happen as a matter of course? What about the Andrew Lansley plan?
The Andrew Lansley plan, which I remember having to look into in great detail when I was writing my book on the coalition, it was famously described as being so big you could see it from space, and also famously, he didn't tell anyone. He just sprung it on them at a cabinet meeting, and George Osborne said apparently, "What the fuck is this?" And he was Chancellor, so to be fair, it was a good question. And you know they had to pause it because the Lib Dems, it was a coalition government, went justifiably insane over the whole thing, and it was a terrible plan. And then Jeremy Hunt tried to undo it semi-successful, but it was all about structure.
Yeah.
And how you organise GP care, and it ended up with just total chaos.
Yeah.
Now, to be fair to Streeting, I think that his is a bit more content-driven, and it has a healthy emphasis upon preventive care, a healthy emphasis upon digital homogenisation. We've mentioned on the pod before.
Yeah.
You know that it's crazy, isn't it? That bits of the NHS can't speak to each other.
Yeah, and the services are totally different.
But my honest view, and I don't know what you think, Matt, is until I hear that figure next whenever it is, on October the 30th
on the budget,
I'm reserving judgment.
I agree, because
I don't, I know that Labour feels obliged to say reform must go with investment, and maybe that's true.
Yeah.
But what the truth is, what the NHS needs now is a fuckload of cash.
That's right.
Right.
There was a brilliant calculator. Was it in the FT? Someone put it round our editorial WhatsApp group, which you play. I think it was the FT had done it, and the idea was that you're the Chancellor, and there's your budget, and you want to put 2% more into defence and 2% more into health, and it is astonishing how impossible it is to make the numbers add up.
It is very difficult, and
so,
I don't. I would be, to be fair to Streeting, he's a class act.
Yeah.
He's in it. This is not Lansley Mark II.
Yeah.
But unless what he proposes is accompanied by an absolute windfall of cash, it will just be another, rearranging the paper clips.
The thing that pissed me off about Keir Starmer and Wes Streeting's approach to this is this whole thing, you tell us,
Yeah.
I'm sorry, but it's like getting onto a massive cruise ship and the captain bellowing over the tannoy, right, who wants to go
to that iceberg?
Any ideas where we should go? It's like, no, we've elected you to lead us, not to ask us. It's like, tell us where we go.
Followership, this is called.
It's called leadership.
Yeah,
that's right. Yeah.
No, I really think we've kind of tested to destruction the idea that,
what are people going to say, Matt? They're going to say we want shorter waiting lists. We don't want to die from cancer quick. We want X, Y, and, all the bleeding obvious stuff.
I would like to have my GP appointment before I have to ask for assisted dying.
Do you really have to set up software platforms and go and waste all this time waiting for those obvious answers? It's nuts.
I'll tell you what, just very briefly, I do think there's an issue here, which is that politicians themselves are losing their nerve on representative democracy.
Right.
And it's their job to make it work.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
Saying, we'll have a consultation. Well, okay, but, that just delays everything by a year. We know everything that could possibly be relevant is in the public domain. Just do it.
If they want to ask about something, ask people about Brexit. Right, ask about ideas with our relationship with the European Union.
On Brexit?
Because I can tell you what the bloody answer will be.
You know what the answer will be.
They've got their fingers in the ears when it comes to that. But they want to hear about, what do you think about GP waiting times?
Yes.
Okay, very interested there, not interested on the big stuff. Thank you, Marek, for your question. Mike in France asks, why is it that the government, instead of tackling the causes of obesity by facing down the food lobby, will be giving anyone weighing over 4 kilograms.
I think that must be way more than 4 kilograms than they should.
That's all of us.
That's most of us.
More than 4 kilograms overweight, a weight loss injection. If they reduced the number of fast food joints and the amount of ultra-processed food sold, it would reduce obesity dramatically. Yours in disbelief, writes Mike in France. Where the food is better, I think we can commonly concur, can't we?
Well, I mean,
obesity is much lower in France than it is here.
Yes, well, look, we've mentioned on the pod before how important it is to deal with ultra-processed food. Totally agree with that. Diet, I think, nutrition should be much more part of education than it is. I think kids don't know enough about it.
Yeah.
Although I have to say the younger generation are probably better than their elders, generally speaking. And I certainly agree that you want to tackle obesity before you just throw Ozempic at the problem.
Yeah.
I mean, I don't know about you. I'm slightly concerned by the sort of nationalization of Ozempic, in the sense that I've heard great stories about it anecdotally, but I've also heard a lot of stories of people who've in one case was sort of crippled and in bed for a week. Yeah, I mean, people have really serious reactions to this. It's obviously a very, very strong drug. I mean, people are losing up to 20% of their body weight.
I've got a mate who I hadn't seen for a few months it was, and he was a different man.
Right, I mean, it really...
he'd lost about 4 stone. Right. It was incredible.
It really does work, apparently.
Yeah.
And that's great, I think, for people who are struggling through other means. But what worries me a bit is that it's a bit like the sort of rush to cosmetic surgery, the use of filters. I mean, the idea that you can just sort of do an injection once a week, and you don't have to keep fit and you don't have to watch your diet.
No, that's a bit crazy. Yeah.
And I just worry that it's... And also, it hasn't been around for very long.
That's right. I mean,
there
is a history of drugs wildly popular drugs suddenly having massively negative side effects.
Put it this way, I'm no doctor, but it stands to reason that what it does must be fantastically disruptive to your metabolism.
It induces a form of starvation.
Right. By definition, you're doing huge things to your physiology. Yeah. Now, what are the 5, 10, 15-year horizons on that?
I don't know. I'll tell you one thing that I agree with Mike about, which is, I don't know if you can, I mean, it seems unlikely that you could say we're going to prohibit or set a quota for fast food joints. But I remember when...
Oh, yes, you could.
Well, I'll tell you one thing. I remember McDonald's, right?
Wonderful place.
Great food.
Great food.
Would you like some lies with that?
Let's have some lies.
McDonald's, and they may still well be doing this, is, 15 years ago, I launched a website called mirrorfootball.com it was the Daily Mirror's football website. And I remember we tried to...
the clue was in the name, I suppose.
We tried to get McDonald's to sponsor it. And they said, no, all our money is going into grassroots football. We're providing kits for kids.
Right.
And we're paying for pitches, and we're encouraging grassroots football. And I thought at the time, you shouldn't be allowed anywhere near promoting stuff to children and putting those bloody golden arches on it. You shouldn't be allowed to talk to children in any regard. Because what you do in the long term, and McDonald's PR, feel free to write in and tell me I'm talking bollocks, but what you're doing is playing a part in inculcating a fast food society, and that's part of the reason we've got fat kids walking around everywhere.
You said we couldn't have quotas, but why not? I mean, why? We zone everything, right?
Yeah.
Local authorities have great power. Why shouldn't there be only one fast food per whatever?
Well, we don't allow them near primary schools, do we?
Right.
Okay. Maybe we could expand.
I mean, the problem, of course, is now with Deliveroo and Uber Eats and all the rest of it.
Yeah, they come to you.
They come to you. So,
Mike, thank you for that question all the way from France. Have we got time for one more question? Yes, we do. And it's from old school 1972 in Slough.
Do the Mats approve of Paddington Bear being given a real passport? This refers, I think, to a story this week that in the making of one of the many Paddington films, Paddington has actually been given a real passport by the passport office.
So 1% of me does approve and thinks, oh, what does it matter? Someone's having a bit of fun. 99% of me thinks, can somebody grow the fuck up, please?
I'm so pleased you said that.
Address the problems of immigration and migration, and stop trying to do PR stunts involving this sodding bear.
Yeah, I mean, I'm afraid, God rest her soul. This is the Queen's fault.
It really is,
because she did that bloody thing with
Olympic
Paddington Bear, and everyone went, "Oh, right." There's
those cards of the Queen marching off into heaven.
Yeah, and do you
when
remember
she died with holding Paddington's
hand? And do you remember the endless jokes about when Rwanda was going on? And it was funny at the start. Oh, Paddington wouldn't be allowed here now, right? The first time, yep, we get it. It's a good joke, right? But it went on and on and on. But the thing about Paddington being given a passport that makes me feel cold and loath and mean, right, and brings out all my worst instincts, is I hate tweeness, right?
Yeah.
And I have a horrible feeling that post-Brexit Britain is the Antiques Roadshow element of Britain, the British Bake-Off element of Britain, right? The fucking Archer's Omnibus element of Britain is coming out a bit more, right? And that giving Paddington, his own passport, people go, it's a bit of fun, right?
This is what we'll be left with, isn't it? Harry Potter themed Paddington
Bear.
We'll
all die in a Hogwarts, in a dilapidated Hogwarts theme park. Eating ultra-processed food and making jokes about Paddington.
It really sucks.
Happy Sunday, all of you.
And just as PR goes, it's like, honestly, haven't you got something better to do?
The passport office, the passport office, which is supposed to be dealing with, 100 million bloody applications, dealing with the population mobility. Sorry, Paddington Bear is for children, right?
And they've got, the weird thing is, they've got a genuine story to tell, which is apparently, I read, the passport office experience has been utterly transformed in the last few years and is now fit for purpose.
Yes.
Things are processed really quickly.
I have to say that when I went there...
It's a great administrative success.
When I went to get my new passport earlier this year, it was very, very straightforward.
Yeah.
But I have to say there were no fictional characters in the queue ahead of me.
No marmalade sandwiches lying around.
No Anna Karenina, no bloody Charlie
Maybe we should
Bucket.
just put Paddington on the front of the passport now.
Yeah, I mean, why not? Britain brought to you by Paddington Bear and Harry Potter.
That's right. And finally, some people might like to come in.
Britain, laughable nation, right? Sorry about that.
Old school 1972. Don't know whether you approve of Paddington
but we don't.
Getting a passport, but we do not. Thank you for all of your questions. Don't forget, if you want to see this kind of witty banter, this superb intellect,
furious resentment,
this abject bitterness,
boiling
middle-aged bitterness, you can see it in the flesh.
At the
Phoenix in Cavendish Square.
You dare.
On November the 25th. If you go to theneweuropean.co.uk/2mattslive, that's the number 2, MATTS live, you can get tickets and they're going fast, so don't dilly-dally.
Don't miss it.
Thank you so much for all your questions. Email in any questions for next week on 2mats@tnepublishing.com. That's 2mats, the number 2, MATTS, at tnepublishing.com. Do subscribe, get your free Christmas cards. You will be the star of your friends and family when you send out our very funny Christmas cards, and you can subscribe from just £1 a week at theneweuropean.co.uk/2mats. There's a link in the show notes. Thanks to Rethink Audio, led by Matt Hill, and
we'll see you tomorrow.
Have a great Sunday.
Have a great Sunday.